"Who let the janitor in here?" The words hit the showroom floor like a dropped wrench. Every salesperson turned. The man in the oil-stained jacket stood near the door, hands in his pockets, looking at a silver sedan like he was memorizing it. "Sir." The voice came from Brendan Hollister, 26 years old, 3 months into the job, already top of the leaderboard, 2 months running. He crossed the floor with the kind of confidence that only works when you've never been wrong about someone. "Can I help you find something?" The auto parts store is about 2 miles east on Whitmore. The man didn't look up from the car. His name was Joseph Aguilar. He was 51 years old. He had grease on his knuckles that didn't come from laziness. It came from 16-hour days in a shop he'd built with his brother in 1998, then rebuilt alone after his brother died in 2009, then scaled into something nobody in this city would have believed possible when he was pushing a broom across that same concrete floor at 19 years old. His jacket had his name on the chest, not the company name, his name, because he'd earned that. He drove 40 minutes to get here. He could have sent someone. He never sent someone when it was something he wanted to see with his own eyes. "I'll take a look around," Joseph said. Brendan smiled. It was the smile of someone who had already decided. "Our inventory starts at 62,000. Just want to make sure you're in the right place." Joseph finally looked at him. "I know what your inventory starts at." "Right." Brendan glanced back toward the sales desk where his colleague Tara was watching. She raised her eyebrows. He turned back. "Look, I don't want to waste your time." "Then don't." Brendan laughed once through his nose. He walked away. Joseph stood in the showroom of Hollister Premier Automotive. No relation to Brendan, though Brendan had mentioned the name enough times that new clients sometimes assumed, and looked at the cars the way he always looked at things he was about to buy. Carefully, without hurry. He hadn't planned to be here today. He'd planned to be in a meeting at 10, then lunch with his accountant, then a call with the investors from Phoenix. But he'd passed this dealership on the way in this morning and seen the new fleet on the lot. And something about the morning made him want to stop. He was allowed to want things. He'd spent a long time not letting himself. The dealership had been open for 11 years. It was owned by a man named Conrad Voss, 64, semi-retired in practice if not on paper. Conrad came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, walked the floor, shook hands, and left by noon. The day-to-day ran through the general manager, a woman named Patricia Slade, who was meticulous about numbers, not always about people. Brendan had been Patricia's hire. She liked his energy. He liked commission. He returned to the sales desk and leaned against the counter. "He's still over there." Tara looked. So he's been standing next to the same car for 8 minutes. Maybe he likes it. In that jacket? Brendan shook his head. "I'm telling you, he's going to ask me to lower the price on something he can't afford, then walk out and waste another hour of my morning." Tara had been in automotive sales for 9 years. She knew the math of assumptions. She'd been wrong about people enough times to know that wrong was expensive, but she said nothing. She turned back to her paperwork. Brendan watched Joseph pull out his phone, take a photo of the sedan's interior through the glass, send it to someone. "I'm going to move him along," Brendan said. "Leave it." He didn't. He walked back across the floor. Joseph was crouching slightly, looking at the roofline, the angle of the windshield. "Look," Brendan said, and his voice had dropped into a different register now, the one that meant he thought he was being reasonable. "I've got clients coming in at 11 who have appointments. I can't have the floor tied up." Joseph stood up straight. He was not a tall man, but he had the stillness of someone who didn't need height to take up space. "I'm a client. You don't have an appointment. Do I need one to walk into a car dealership?" Brendan's jaw tightened. "It's a courtesy thing." "All right." Joseph nodded slowly. "I'll be done in a few minutes. I'd rather you schedule something for another day." The showroom was quiet enough that 2 other salespeople heard this. One of them, a man named Greg, who had been in the industry for 20 years and had made every mistake Brendan was currently making, looked at the floor. Joseph looked at Brendan for a moment. Then he took out his phone again, not to take another photo. He typed something, put it away. I'll schedule something, Joseph said. Don't worry about it. He walked out. Brendan watched him go. See, he said to no one in particular, wasted our time. That afternoon, Patricia Slade was in her office reviewing the quarterly numbers when her phone rang. The number on the screen was Conrad Voss's personal cell. He never called on Wednesdays. She picked up. Pat. Conrad's voice was careful. That was the word for it. Not angry. Careful. The way you are when you're deciding how to say something you've already decided needs to be said. Do you know who Joseph Aguilar is? She did not immediately. Then she did. Aguilar Motorworks. The same. She closed her eyes. Aguilar Motorworks was not a name that meant much to people outside the industry. Inside it, the name was a different kind of weight. Joseph Aguilar had started with a single-bay shop in the east side of the city, doing oil changes and brake jobs for $18 less than the dealerships charged. Over 20 years, he'd grown it into a fleet maintenance operation serving the city's 3 largest logistics companies. 2 years ago, he'd been acquired. Not bought out, acquired, on terms he negotiated, by a national automotive group. He sat on their board. He still wore the jacket. Patricia Slade knew all of this the moment Conrad said the name, because Aguilar Motorworks had been in talks with Hollister Premier about a fleet contract, 47 vehicles, service agreements, a relationship worth, conservatively, over $3 million across 5 years. Joseph Aguilar had been the one to initiate the conversation. He'd wanted to see the product in person before moving forward. He had come to the showroom this morning. Pat, Conrad said, what happened today? She didn't have an answer yet. She was about to get one. She walked onto the floor and asked Greg what he'd seen. Greg told her. He didn't enjoy telling her, but he told her. Then she called Brendan into her office and asked him to describe the morning. Brendan described it the way people describe mistakes they don't yet know. Our mistakes. Confidently. With justification. He used the word judgment 3 times, which in this context was accurate in ways he didn't intend. When he finished, Patricia looked at him for a long moment. The man you asked to leave, she said, is the reason we've been in talks about the biggest fleet deal this dealership has ever had. The color left Brendan's face the way water leaves a tipped glass. Fast, then still. He texted Conrad while he was still in the parking lot, Patricia said. Conrad texted me 20 minutes ago. I've been sitting with it since then because I wanted to be very clear before I said anything. Brendan started to speak. Don't. She held up one hand. It wasn't dramatic. It was just final. I want you to think about something. You've been on this floor 3 months. You have good numbers. You work hard. And this morning, you looked at a man and decided, in about 4 seconds, that he didn't belong here, and then you spent the rest of your morning being right about that in every way except the one that matters. Brendan said nothing. You're going to want to call it a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. A mistake is misreading a spreadsheet. What you did this morning was a choice. You made it twice, actually. Once when you walked up to him, and once when you went back. She told him to go home for the day. She told him HR would be in touch tomorrow morning. She told him that what came next was not yet decided, but that it was being decided above her pay grade, which was the only honest thing she could tell him right now. Brendan walked out of the dealership at 2:14 in the afternoon. He sat in his car for 11 minutes before he drove away. Joseph Aguilar was eating lunch at a counter seat near the window of a Vietnamese restaurant on Clement Street when his phone rang. He looked at the number, didn't recognize it, let it go to voicemail. Finished his soup, listened to the message on the way back to his truck. It was Patricia Slade. Her voice was composed and direct. She said she understood if he had no interest in continuing any conversation. She said that what happened this morning was not representative of how they conducted business or wanted to treat anyone who came through their door. She said she was sorry. Joseph got into his truck and sat for a moment. He was not a man who savored these moments. He had experienced enough of them, being underestimated, dismissed, moved along, that the satisfaction of being right had worn thin sometime in his 40s. What he'd learned was that the sting of being underestimated never quite went away, but the surprise did, and once the surprise was gone, you were left with just the tiredness of it. He called Patricia back. She answered on the first ring. "I appreciate the call," he said. "I meant it. I know." There was a pause. Then he said, "I still want to look at the fleet. That hasn't changed. I drove out here because I wanted to see what I'd be buying. I'd like to finish doing that." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I'll be here all afternoon. I've got a 3 o'clock. After that, I'll be here." He came back at 4:15. He wore the same jacket. Patricia met him at the door herself. She walked the floor with him for 40 minutes. She answered every question he had, and he had specific questions, the kind that people ask when they've spent decades learning exactly what questions to ask. He knew what he wanted. He knew what he was willing to pay. He had done this before. They sat in her office. She poured 2 coffees. He took his black. "The young man this morning," Joseph said. Patricia set down her cup. "Yes. How long has he been here?" 3 months. Joseph nodded. "He's not the first." "I know. That's the part that's harder to fix than one person." Patricia looked at him. She had been in this industry a long time. She had sat across from many clients. She could count on one hand the ones who had said something like this, who had walked back in after being embarrassed, ordered a coffee, and immediately started talking about the structural problem instead of the personal one. "We've had conversations about it," she said. "After today, we'll have more." "Good." He looked at the folder she'd prepared. Fleet options, service agreements, pricing. "What's the turnaround on the service contract?" They talked for an hour and 10 minutes. When he left, they had an outline, not a signature. He wasn't going to sign anything in a room where the morning was still fresh, but an outline was more than they'd had at noon. Conrad Voss came in Thursday morning at his usual time. He walked the floor, shook hands, stopped at Greg's desk. "You saw it," Conrad said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, and you didn't say anything." Greg looked at his desk. "No." Conrad was quiet for a moment. "That's the part I keep thinking about." Greg had been thinking about it too. He was 53 years old. He had been in showrooms long enough to know that the silence of people who know better is the floor that bad behavior stands on. He hadn't stepped in. He'd looked away. He'd told himself it wasn't his place. "I've been wrong before," Greg said. "About people. Made the same assumption. And it cost me." He paused. "More than once." Conrad nodded. He moved on. He always moved on. But he stopped at the door before he left and said without turning around, "Nobody gets to decide who belongs here. That's not a judgment call. That's just not a call anyone gets to make." He left. The showroom was quiet for a moment. Then someone's phone rang and the morning continued. The fleet contract was signed 6 weeks later, 47 vehicles, a 5-year service agreement. Patricia announced it at the monthly team meeting without fanfare, which was how she did most things. After the meeting, a new hire named Sabrina, 23, first month on the floor, still learning the product line, came up to Patricia and asked about the deal. She'd heard the number. She wanted to know how it happened. Patricia told her the short version. Sabrina was quiet for a moment. "The guy who got fired, Brendan? He wasn't fired." Patricia had navigated that carefully. Brendan had been given the choice to resign or face a documented performance review process that included mandatory bias training and a probationary period. He had resigned. That was his choice. He resigned because of the Aguilar thing, because of a pattern of choices that the Aguilar thing made visible. Sabrina thought about this. He had the best numbers on the floor. For 3 months, Patricia said. Good numbers are easy to read. Everything else takes longer. She picked up her folder. The job isn't who closes the most deals in a quarter. The job is whether someone walks through that door and feels like they have a right to be here, every single time, regardless of what they're wearing. She looked at Sabrina. You understand the difference? Sabrina nodded. Good. Patricia moved toward her office. Now go learn the service contract package. Mr. Aguilar's people start orientation next week. Joseph Aguilar was back in his original shop on a Friday afternoon, not because he had to be, but because some habits survive success. He liked the smell of it, the sound. He liked the way his oldest mechanic, a man named Dennis, who had been with him since 2002, never treated him like a boss unless he was acting like one. His daughter called while he was reviewing an inspection report. "I heard about the dealership thing," she said. "Word travels, Dad. You went back. I needed to see the vehicles." She laughed, but it wasn't entirely a laugh. "You didn't have to go back, I know." "Then why?" Joseph thought about it. He'd thought about it more than once since that morning. He could have walked away. He had walked away from worse. He had a saying he'd developed sometime in his 40s, after a particular meeting with a banker who had talked to him like he was applying for a favor rather than presenting a business. "You don't have to educate every room. Some rooms aren't worth it, but this one had been worth it. Not because of the fleet deal. He would have found another dealer and probably gotten a better price. It was worth it because he'd walked in as a customer, and someone had decided in 4 seconds that he didn't qualify. And he had done the math on how many other people who didn't have his years, his resources, his stubborn refusal to accept the first answer, had walked out of rooms like that and never walked back in, who had swallowed it, who had let the 4-second judgment stand. "Because someone else is going to walk in there next week," he said. "In a jacket like mine. And how they get treated matters." His daughter was quiet. "Doesn't have to be a big thing," he said. "You go back, you sit down, you make them think about it. That's enough." He heard her exhale slowly. "I'm proud of you, you know. I know you're also impossible. I know that too." He hung up. He finished the inspection report. Outside the bay door, a car pulled in for a scheduled service. Dennis walked out to meet it, clipboard in hand, saying the same thing he said to every car that pulled into that lot. "Good afternoon. What can we take care of for you today?" 20-some years, and he'd never started differently. Joseph had noticed that on the first day Dennis worked for him, and had never forgotten it. It was the simplest thing in the world. It was also, it turned out, everything. The story of what happened at Hollister Premier Automotive did not go viral. There was no bystander video, no hashtag, no press conference. Joseph did not speak publicly about it. He had no interest in that. What he had interest in was the work, the contracts, the vehicles, the people on his payroll who showed up every day and did the job. But Conrad Voss talked to 2 other dealership owners he played golf with on Sundays, and Patricia Slade brought in a consultant to review front-of-house procedures. And Greg, the salesperson who had looked away, started doing something different on the floor. When he saw a colleague making a 4-second judgment, he walked over. He didn't make a scene. He just inserted himself, extended his hand to the customer, said, "Welcome in, I'm Greg," and let the moment redirect. It was small. It was consistent. He did it without applause. It's worth asking, what would you have done? Not the version of you that reads about this afterward and knows how it turned out. The version of you that's standing 12 feet away in a showroom, watching a colleague make a call that feels wrong, but also feels like someone else's business. That version, the one who has a quota and a mortgage and doesn't want to make it weird. That version is the one that actually matters. Because Brendan Hollister wasn't an outlier. He was a pattern. And patterns don't break because one person gets embarrassed. They break because the people standing 12 feet away decide one morning that looking away is no longer something they're willing to do. Joseph Aguilar drives one of the 47 vehicles now, dark blue. He still wears the jacket. Nobody at Hollister Premier asks him if he's in the right place.